of us in government couldn't talk about until Stephen wrote about them. An amazing job and doing his own kind of service and very kindly moderating this panel tonight. So Stephen was writing for Wired at the time when he really sort of somehow magically got wind of the fact that while Mikey Dickerson and his team were sort of duct taping the current site together, there was another team led by a fantastic woman named Jeannie Kim. She and her, 10, 12 people, essentially rewrote all of healthcare.gov in about 3.5 months. So if you think, as many people in federal government did, that we needed $600 or $700 million to do it, you were wrong, and Jeannie showed you that. And Stephen told the world that, and he continues to follow this this movement from where he is now, which is actually doing this amazing thing at Medium called Backchannel. But I'd like to, Stephen will come up and I guess bring the rest of us up. So come on up, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let's have the panelists up here. And you've heard from them before, but we have a new one, Ariel. I guess, yeah. So Ariel, Ariel Kennan, from New York City. Just briefly, just tell us, a little bit who you are, because we learned about the rest of these folks.
Sure. I work on Matt's team in the Mayor's Office of Operations. I was also formerly a Code for America Fellow. And I'm building a new digital product development team inside NYC government, so please come talk to us.
And what happened today?
We launched a new system today. It is not a healthcare.gov. It is up and stable and running great.
And how many hundreds of millions of dollars did it cost?
No answer.
But it didn't cost $300 million.
It did not.
Okay.
So it's Access NYC, which is the city's public benefits portal, and also online SNAP application. It processes around 30,000 SNAP applications every single month for New Yorkers.
Great. So we have someone from Boston, someone from New York. You're both city and federal. Jen, has put people in cities and also spent her time at the White House. So I'm just curious, if someone wanted to get in there, I hear sometimes that the cities are actually the place where you could do the most leverage there. And then other people say, well, the big problems to tackle are the federal government's there. Which is the best place, the place you'd make the most difference from going in? Would it be the cities or the federal government there? Yeah.
New York's working in New York City, of course. No, but to be honest, I got that question a lot. A lot of people sort of assume you go, city, state, federal, and that's sort of the standard hierarchy. So a lot of people, when I told them I was taking this job here as chief analytics officer, they said, well, aren't you already working in the federal government? Why are you doing that? But the challenges are that much more difficult, because anyone up here will tell you, immediately when you release a technology, a capability, or you do something, especially in the case of MODA, when we do an analytic and we push it out, you get immediate feedback, right? In the federal government, it's not as immediate. And so you have to be, when you release something and you do something, you have to be on call to now respond to that feedback and make the changes. So it's sleeves rolled up, hands in the dirt, going to town every single minute of every single hour of every single day. So I would say it's actually been a much more challenging opportunity here in New York City than in the federal government.
I'll just say why I chose to go and work in the city. Cities are the interface layer between people and government. Most folks interact with the federal government once a year. They pay their taxes. Maybe they get a Social Security check. Similar with state governments. But we interact with cities every day, and we deal with the success or failure of city government every day. So if there is a place where you want to go and you can go and get your hands dirty really trying to experiment at that interface layer, it's city government. Now that having been said, we can only do so much in a city, and we need people working at every level of government to build the systems, the culture, the process that will work at scale. So I think the opportunity is nearly endless.
I'll just add to that briefly. Code for America's mission doesn't say anything about local government. We want to make government work for the people, by the people in the 21st century by bringing everyone to the table for all the reasons that Ahmed and Jascha just talked about. Our current strategy is to work with local government. We obviously continue to work with federal government. But if you see it through a lens of service delivery, it really it makes a lot of sense. But the other lens to look at it through is that nobody gives a damn what level of government these things happen at. I mean, you survey people about, government working or, whether they're paying their taxes or they're getting a driver's license. The average American does not give a damn whether it happens with cities, counties, states, federal government, or some agency that no one can figure out what level of government it occurs to. It doesn't matter. We just want government to work, and that's why I really think at the end of the day, it's like this whole movement of people who care about government working, not about some level working.
So let's talk about the culture there. People have a certain view of civil service. Can both federal and in states and cities there. You have an idea. You come in there. You're wearing your suit and your tie, and you work there, and maybe you get a little office in the sub-basement there, but it doesn't really look like a Silicon Valley sort of operation there. Do your people come in? Can you wearing shorts and t-shirts, no one blinks, and you do your daily stand-ups there? What's the culture like? Is it more like a city or state government culture, or is it more like a kind of culture that makes great software?
When I first applied for Code for America, I thought Code for America is never going to want some designer from New York. I used to work at an agency down the street, and I thought I could use my talents for something else. And Code for America really changed my life, inspired me to go into full-time public service, but found both in my fellowship and now being a full-time public servant that it's a lot about building trust. It's the culture change, which I think Jascha spoke about wonderfully. I've just in my 7 months in now, some quick design wins, things when people can't see the problem, helping them see the problem, doing things like redesigning icon sets for applications. That's not really in my job description, but you just pick it up and do it and build the trust. There's definitely a formality as well. We've seen some rockiness with startups that come in and don't adhere to some of the kind of dress code and culture that we're used to. But I think there's a lot of us on the inside now who are trying to broker more of those relationships and build that trust and say, hey, it's okay. And a first conversation doesn't mean a lifetime sign up for it. Let's at least talk about it and get started.
My experience in city government is that in some ways it's exactly what you expect, and in other ways it's nothing like it. It's exactly what you would expect in the sense that it's City Hall, there's a lot of people in suits, there's a lot of kind of consciousness about whose department is doing this, whose territory this is. And you have to be mindful of that. You can't just sort of say, oh, that's nonsense, we're just going to do it our way. But what I think is different from expectations is the degree to which the people who work in government really care about the work that they do. They can articulate why they do it, who they serve, why it matters in people's lives, all of the stuff that we try to talk about here of, really not just being focused on tech, but focused on people and problems and solutions. That is something that is, in my experience, endemic across city government. So that's the common language. And so we may dress differently or come from cultures that dress differently. There's a bit more hierarchy, there's a bit more structural awareness within government than we're used to in startups. But if you can speak to people in the common language of saying we are both trying to solve this very real challenge for citizens, you can do so much good work. And that just cuts through so much of the superficial stuff.
Just really quickly, I think one of my favorite articles done by Mikey Dickerson or about him when he first started was that he said that people from back home in Silicon Valley used to call him up and ask him, are you wearing a suit yet? Did they force you to put on a suit yet? And he took that as sort of that general discussion of, have they forced you to start thinking their way about solving problems, or have you kept sort of your way? I think when it comes to Moda, I think everybody at Moda snappy dresses, so we're sort of the exception, but I think that's what's key is, are we creating the culture as opposed to conforming to what is usually considered, government culture? And I think certainly MODA, just by virtue of its existence, it created itself, right? It was a problem that needed to be solved in cities like ours, where we needed to use data and analytics to solve problems. So it created itself. We found the right people, and so we keep that culture, and that's the culture that has been successful.
So, a sort of religion in Silicon Valley and software development here that you're really like nothing unless you fail, and failure is a badge of honor. But in government, it's a little different. There's consequences when there's a failure. You mentioned if someone spends $300 million and gets nothing for it. I still haven't figured out how that kind of stuff happens. But even well-intentioned failures. Let's try this great idea. It doesn't work. In Silicon Valley, that's great, but there could be consequences. Political enemies of whatever administration happens to be in there will jump on it there. I know when I was talking to the healthcare.gov people, they knew if they screwed up, they would be in front of a congressional committee. And indeed, Todd Park was in front of a congressional committee there. How do you deal with that? Can you do the work that's your best work with that sort of Damocles hanging over your head?
Just 2 seconds. That reminds me of a conversation we had. A vendor come in and was talking to MODA about this really fancy machine learning platform and technology that they wanted us to buy. And the guy used this example of, well, let me tell you about machine learning and what it's for. And he gave this example of how Netflix, predicts what you might want to watch based on what you have watched. And literally at that moment, I did like this. I said, time out. Let me tell you something. When Netflix, which it almost always does, suggests movies that I could care less about watching, I don't go and cancel the subscription, right? Like, I keep moving. But if we use machine learning and tell some investigators to go somewhere where they shouldn't have gone, or send an ambulance somewhere where it shouldn't have gone, or identified something that shouldn't have happened, if we use analytics at MODA to do that, a lot of people are in trouble. And so a couple of things. One is MODA, we're on top of our game, and everyone brings their A game every day, all day. That's one. Two is, as the director, I've let them know, your job is to do what you do, and my job is to do the blocking and tackling. So where there are going to be some of those failures and concerns, my job is to get out in front of that. And so you have to sort of give them the space with which to move and be smart, but then they have to always feel protected in that capacity as well. And so it's a tough back and forth, but that's the world we live in.
I'll just add to that in that, I think the piece that people miss from the Silicon Valley religion, as you said, is that it's limited, right? What we do when we're rolling out products is that we take a very, very small subset of people, and it doesn't matter that much. And it's very hard to do that in government for a number of reasons that we could go into. But one of my favorite lines from Clay Shirky wrote a great piece in Foreign Affairs about the failure of healthcare.gov. You may have read it, Stephen, but he and I talked a lot before that, and he has this great line about Agile in it that says, it's about the waterfall method, which is sort of the planned method of rolling things out. He says, the waterfall method amounts to a pledge by all parties not to learn anything while doing the actual work. But his other great line is like, why didn't healthcare.gov have a staged rollout where you roll it out to a set number of people first, have them try it, they will fail on it, we will learn what needs to be fixed, we'll fix it, and then we roll it out to the broader population. Hundreds of people have gone through and we've fixed those bugs, which is exactly what happened. But his great line was, why is it that the administration keeps insisting we couldn't have a staged rollout while we are actually having one? Right? That's what ends up happening, is that we do it, and it doesn't work, and so most people can't get through the site, and we have a staged rollout anyway. We could just do it that way in the first place. But to Ahmed's point, I mean, the stakes are higher, and you really have to think it through in a different way than how we do it in Silicon Valley. But that process is still valuable, and the limiting of risk is the key issue.
I would just add to that. I mean, we spend billions of dollars a year in this country on failed government IT projects, right? We are not, the system we have is not working. We are not proposing some dangerous alternative to a highly functional system of building and implementing technology, right? So part of our job here when we talk about risk, and it is real, and it is a different environment, it is political, it does have ramifications that go beyond just the success or failure of a company, but part of our job is to talk about what's not working and to talk about the ways in which we are addressing the issue of risk with other tools that will hopefully cost less, fail less frequently, and deliver better outcomes.
So are you describing a system, because you say, look, we're working around that, we're trying to do procurement without changing the rules here. So is the idea of this reform movement something that happens like almost like a hack or a guerrilla operation, as opposed to ever hoping that we're going to get those big things like the way the regulations are written and the procurements things changed? Do you feel like this movement, this the agile-based way of doing things with common sense and and the way we know software should be written, do you feel that's becoming the predominant way, or is it doomed, at least in the short or maybe medium term, to be somewhat of a guerrilla operation? And that's who you're recruiting, is the pirates, to work underneath these crazy regulations that you couldn't imagine being changed.
Amin talked about something called the tech FAR, but you alluded to it a bit obliquely. Does anyone here know people know here what the FAR is? Okay, not that many. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, it's how many pages? 1,300? So it's a 1,300-page document describing how we're supposed to buy or build technology for the federal government, and it cascades down to state and local as well. And one of the things that I worked on when I was in my year of service was a version of that reinterpreted the FAR. It wasn't a new document. It was an interpretation of the Federal Acquisition Regulation that said not only is it not illegal to use agile methods to develop, but so when I went in, everyone did tell me that it was illegal. You can't do that. Why would it be illegal to use agile methods to develop government software? Because we have a very reasonable thing that says if you're going to buy something using taxpayer dollars, you ought to know what you're buying before you buy it. That's not actually crazy. It's just crazy in the sense that what that's resulted in is, as Jascha mentioned too, what we think is probably a 94% failure rate. Because software isn't built the way buildings are built, or even the way cars are built, and even they aren't built that way anymore. But the tech FAR, really briefly, is an interpretation that says, actually, if you want to spend the taxpayer dollars well, you should not just not avoid Agile, you should build in an Agile way, and there's sort of a corollary to it, which is that you can buy software as a service. The reason I bring this up is that is actually not from the edges. That's from the center of the beast. It was issued by the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, OFPP. If you know the acronym OFPP, you want to hang with us at the bar. But I do think the problem is it still feels like the edge because it takes years for something that comes from the center of government to filter down through all the agencies. I mean, Amin's there going, oh my God, tech FAR, yes. But he's got a whole agency behind him going, but that's not consistent with what we've been doing for the past 20 years. It just takes time, but it is policy issued by the people who are in charge, and it will become the way we do it.
I would just add, I mean, so much of what the challenges with procurement is tradition, not law. Right, and we've heard this in all different ways. We've had our own experiences with reinterpreting some things that people had just taken on face value and seeing very different outcomes from it. Even issues of what does that RFP look like, right? It's like no, there are certain things that have to be in there by statute, but you can structure it in a way that does not put you to sleep by page 2, right? Like, it is possible to actually restructure some of these things. I mean, you know, this is sort of an odd thing to say as somebody working in government technology, because I feel like I'm supposed to be saying, like, procurement is terrible, but, like, that's not the biggest challenge that we have. And, you know, what I need is more people who are interested and willing to do things in new ways, to experiment, to explore what we can do within the system. Are there regulatory changes that I would like to see? Absolutely. I think those will come in time, though, as we demonstrate success with some of the methods that we're having. I don't think that, we can't point to that and say, oh, that's why we can't innovate in government.
Just wanted to add something that I literally, when we started working with the Tech FAR, no lie, literally someone came to my office and said, if you keep doing that, you will end up in an orange jumpsuit. Like, literally somebody told me I was going to get arrested. That's right. Like, they literally said that I could go to jail if I didn't follow the rules. But just to your question, one of the things that MODA sort of brings to the table, it could be considered guerrilla style or hacking, but I think the new way of taking on a lot of these challenges are looking at things differently, specifically looking at things from a data-driven perspective, and that's what MODA does. MODA looks at problems from what data do we have that helps us better understand this problem. So one of the things that we've done in the city is work with MOCS, Mayor's Office of Contract Services, and understand the end-to-end procurement process, right? And so that now we can understand the pieces of the process and solve them in a more granular, like with a scalpel, as opposed to sort of this broad, you know, sledgehammer way of solving procurement, right? Let's just throw it all out, right? Like, we can look at different processes because we use data to actually identify what the process end-to-end looks like. And so it's different, using different technologies and a different mindset to solve those challenges.
I think we're also looking at, kind of before we ever go to the procurement stage, having the talent and resources inside. I knew I was winning when someone in our leadership the other day said, what if we take the prototype to OMB before we do the request for services? And I said, yes, that exactly. But it means that the culture is changing, and we're really doing it and thinking about really making, we may go procure a contractor to build something new for us, but it has a lot more thought behind it before it goes out there.
So the effort to recruit people in the private sector, I mean, there's amazing challenges because obviously talented people in software are in huge demand and from amazing companies, both big companies and startups, you know. And I think the pitch, what I've heard in part is, well, you know, come, it's almost like a national service thing. Come and do your part and stay. But I've noticed, you know, that there's also sort of a lure to it that once sometimes people are in, they get swept up in the changes they make there. So you're laughing because I wanted to ask the three people. Jen seems to have escaped temporarily, but I want to ask the three of you who are working here. Are you guys lifers now?
Definitely not. I think that the lure for me was. Real funny story. So I told you I transitioned from being a White House fellow. By the way, my MODA team knows that I always tell things in stories. Transitioned from being a White House fellow to a CTO. The director and chief of staff brought me in the office one day and said, Amin, would you like to stay at OPM after your year-long, you know, White House fellowship is over? I said, sure. They said, would you like to be our CTO? I said, well, you know, I've been working on some really meaty projects, and you know, I would love to stay and get the opportunity to work on retirement and really solve the retirement problem. So I don't care what you call the title. I just want to stay and work on some really important, meaty stuff and have, you know, leadership role here. They said, okay, but do you want to be the CTO or not? So I said, sure, I'll take the title. But as long as the challenges are there, I'm here. Right? Like, that's what I sought after coming into the federal government through the White House Fellows Program, were the challenges. And the challenges, they exist. There's different ways of looking at challenges. The city proposes challenges where you have minimal resources to take those challenges on. And so now it's up to you to find different ways, and smarter ways, and innovative ways to solve really tough problems. As long as those challenges exist, I'm not going anywhere.
So, I don't think I'm in government as a lifer, but you know, I didn't start out in government. I came to government through a company that I founded, and you know, through the business world. I mean, I think that there's so many different lenses that you can look at this through, and I don't think that there is a right answer. This isn't about government people versus private sector people. In fact, I think some of the best people in government are people who came from the private sector, and some of the best people in the private sector doing civic technology are people with experience in government. There is a tremendous value in cross-pollination. I don't think you have to choose, like you're a government person for life or you're something else. You know, I had a conversation with somebody on my team shortly after I started. I was going to make a hire, and we have this step system for salaries. When somebody comes in, you sort of pick what step they're at, and then they get one step a year until they hit the top step, and then their salary's capped out. And the person said to me, well, if we hire this person at step 8, which is one below the top, we're only going to be here for 2, 3, maybe 4 years, and then they're going to leave and go do something else because they're not going to be able to make any more money. I said, that's fine, right? My goal is not to build an army of lifetime government employees. My goal is to make change 1 week, 1 year, 1 quarter, like one administration at a time. This is not about staffing government forever. So I think for people who are interested in this, and if you want to go make money, go make money. If you want to try to find a way to make money while also doing good in the world, that's even better. If you want to take a break and work in government and work much harder than you did in the private sector for a lot less money, but have an impact that's even bigger, come work in government for a few years. I mean, there don't need to be a lot of rules, and I don't think we have to set up such strong dichotomies for people.
I don't know would be my answer. My private sector experience has really influenced a lot of my work in the public sector. I used to do a lot of consulting work with CEOs and CFOs. It's the same as talking to a mayor and other leadership in the city. They go hand in hand with each other. And if I do go back to the private sector at some point, I think my public service will influence that career just as much.
Right. I want to thank all of you. Our time's up there. It was a great time.
Our friend Carl Malamud has a very important message for us, and it is, come on up, Carl. It is, Carl is our fellow traveler in this, on this road to better government. He started doing this way before this was cool. I used to call him, what was it? You were the Indiana Jones of open government. Because he runs in and steals things and then brings them back out for the rest of us. But very timely message from Carl. So we think of ourselves as sort of working inside government with a bit of a carrot. Carl stands on the outside and waves a flag, and he has a message for everybody that's really important. I'm going to have him talk, and then I'm going to close it out. Come on up. Welcome, Carl.
I am a lifer. I am a freelance civil servant. Andrew and Mika, this is an amazing space. Thanks so much for building it. And Jen, thank you